Hello, I'm John McAllister with the John McAllister Report. And as you know, when I do video podcasts, I really like to know as much about the person, he or him herself, rather than just general X and O's and what do you have coming back and what are you looking forward to? How are these guys looking? That's not what I do. I really want to know the person. I want to know what makes a coach tick. I want to know what makes the athlete tick. I just want to know what makes them go. And today I'm really excited because on my video podcast, I have Joe Rossi, the defensive coordinator at Michigan State, the new defensive coordinator at Michigan State. I think he signed on back in February when the coaching changed and Jonathan Smith came in as the head coach from Oregon State, and Joe Rossi came from 7 years at Minnesota to be the DC at Michigan State University. I enjoyed the conversation because he talks about a little bit about his past and a lot about what he looks for in coaches and players, what they demand of their own players, and also how he views recruiting and what he's looking for. We don't spend much time at all on the NIL or the transfer portal because honestly, I don't know if anybody knows what's going on. And I don't think it's fair to ask college coaches their opinions because they don't know for sure what's going on because it changes every day. You got to realize that the college football is really, really broken. But it takes guys like Joe Rossi and head coach Jonathan Smith and their coaches, good coaches, to get the program going again for the Spartans. And they have a tremendous job to do to get that culture back under when they were winning back in the day with Mark D'Antonio, and even before that with Nick Saban. So if you sit back and enjoy my video podcast with Joe Rossi, the defensive coordinator at Michigan State University. But before you do that, or when you do that, I'd also like to have you press the like button because that gives me, or make a comment. I mean, the like button gives me more followers and it helps me. The comments, I enjoy reading the comments and sometimes I take away from them, but I really enjoy what you think. Enjoy Joe Rossi, the defensive coordinator at Michigan State. Thank you. Coach Joe Rossi, I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm so excited about Michigan State football. And honestly, one of the reasons, it sounds hokey, but I'm doing this because I want to help all I can. Because I go back to the D'Antonio days and even before that. And boy, Michigan State football was so good. So good. And I sense you're bringing it back a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I remember too, to be honest with you. Obviously,
they were good. And they hit and they played well, didn't they?
Yeah, Coach D'Antonio did a great job, and I think there was a blue collar mentality. I think they were able to run the ball effectively and control the clock, and they always played great defense. And that was one of the things that was attractive for me, except in a position here was this is a place that's won Big Ten championships. They've played in the college football playoff, and that's something that we're working really hard to getting back to.
And I think you will. I actually believe you will. I still follow some of the Ohio kids, and they're in Samac had just left, and I'll tell you a war story about Nick Samac in a minute. But okay, you got a tough job, but let's sell me on Michigan State football. Sell me on that. I have a 6'2", 215-pound grandson, runs 4.6 every time. Why am I sending him to Michigan State?
Yeah, well, I think there's multiple things. I think it starts with the tradition of Michigan State football and tradition of Michigan State and what they've accomplished in the Big Ten. Yeah, so in terms of Michigan State, I've been asked, a couple times, why Michigan State, and I think the first reason is this place can be special. And when I mean that is you can win Big Ten championships here, you can play in the college football playoff. It's a national brand. I think you can go anywhere in the country and people are going to recognize the Spartans. And then the other thing is our head coach, Coach Smith. He did a phenomenal job turning around Oregon State, and he did it in a way where he came in. They had won one game before he was there, and then when he left, it was a top 25 program 2 years in a row. And he did it from a recruit and development model, and he's done it with hey, we're going to recruit the right people. We're going to bring in players who are really talented, but also really good people, and inject them into the culture. And, he has two things that are really important, and we do as a program. The first one is low ego, high output. We're going to recruit players that have low egos, but then they're going to have a high output. And then the other thing is the star of the team is the team. And those are the types of players we're looking for: blue collar, chip on your shoulder, come in, outwork people. And so I think when you combine that with the things that Michigan State's been able to do as a university from an academic standpoint, but then also some of the things they've done traditionally with the success in the Big Ten, I think it's attractive for people.
I totally agree. And my one comment, I really enjoy listening to Coach Smith because when they ask him questions, he just answers them. I mean, now that sounds silly to you, but he's just straightforward and go on the next question. I mean, he shows little emotion, I think, and that's so good. And that's so good. I'm excited for you guys. Okay, you mentioned culture. I'm sure you've been asked this 500 times, but culture is so important. So important. What are baby steps are you trying to do to get that in place? Because the culture was shot at Michigan State. And I know those guys were there before and all that stuff. But how do you change? How do you work the culture, Joe?
Yeah, I think when you come in, the number one thing that you do is obviously you're worried about the here and the now. You're not necessarily worried about things that had happened in the past. And I think the first thing that you do is you get on the same page in terms of common language and what the common expectations are. That's from the head coach to the coaching staff and the rest of the staff members. And then that's from the staff to the players. So that's kind of the starting ground. The second thing I think you want to be able to do is you want to be able to develop strong relationships with your players so that they can feel that the things that you're talking about and the things that are important to you are the things that are actually true. Because unfortunately, sometimes people talk a good game, but until they trust you and believe you in the things that you're talking about, that's when that kind of creates buy-in. So I think that those are the things that that can kind of get the culture kind of moving in the right direction.
Trust you. Coach, I've done this for over 30 years. I'm slowing down now. But the biggest thing I had going for me was kids trusted me. High school coaches trusted me. College coaches, because I dealt with all of them. And I was able to go back and forth, and they knew I wasn't going to tell anybody else. And I think trust with your football players. That is huge. And I think once they know that they can trust you, they know that you care and care about them. And I think it's huge.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I think the three things, me as a coach with the players that we got to do for them is number one, they got to know that we care about them, and because when they know that you care, that just goes a long way to building that trust. And then the second thing is you got to be positive, and when we talk about being positive, I'm not talking about everything's all right all the time. I'm not talking about sunshine and rainbows. I'm just talking about, hey, listen, you might not be where you want to be, and today may have been a hard day, but we believe in you. Right. Yeah. And then the third thing is to be incredibly demanding of them. They have big goals. I say goals, not dreams, because to me, dreams happen at night. They're not real. They're when your eyes are closed. Goals are things that you're actively working towards. And the glue to all that is the truth. I think players respond. I do get asked a lot, with NIL and with the changes in college football. How is it more business like? It may be to a degree, but at the end of the day, what I found is players at the end of the day want to be coached. Players at the end of the day value when you tell them the truth. And when they know you care and when you know you're positive and when they know you're demanding of them, I think that creates the positive relationship.
Okay. Okay. That's super. You mentioned something on another interview, effort and intentionality. Tell me, I know what effort is, but I don't. Tell me how those go hand in hand.
Yeah, I think when you talk about, here's an example. So you talk about swarming to the ball, pursuit. Everyone talks about that. Well, that's the effort. And I think sometimes you could have wasted effort where you're working really hard, but it's not directed in the right way. So when we talk about, for example, pursuit, we talk about, hey, pursuit is effort and angles. And the angles are the intentionality. But when I talk about intentionality, it's the detail of what you're being asked to do, whether that's setting the edge, whether that's taking notes, whether that's a walkthrough, whether that's film study. You got to be intentional. You got to be deliberate. As a coach, you got to be deliberate in your practice plans. You got to be intentional in what you're asking the players to do. That's the same thing that they need to be able to do. When we do a walkthrough, you talk about hand placement, you talk about first step, you talk about second step. All of those things go hand in hand with the effort.
Right. Right. Okay, Coach, I want to go different direction. I'm so impressed. Okay, you played at Allegheny College, right?
Yes.
And your first job was at Teal, Division III school, right?
Yes.
I find more and more coaches that start Division III, play Division III or Division, they're not all superstars coming out. And I know that I've been around this thing. I coach and I know, but it's so amazing to try to get young college coaches. You don't have to be a volunteer at Michigan, Ohio State, or Bowling Green or Toledo. Go start coaching someplace. You feel that? Give me your advice to some young college coaches. What do they have to do?
Yeah, I think there's not one right way, right? But what I would tell you is if you want to coach, you got to go coach. And I think that's part of it. Like I wouldn't trade my experience for anything because, when you're a young coach at the Division III level, obviously you've got your own room. You've got to be able to go on the road and recruit. You've got to learn how to do more with less. You're asked to do and wear multiple hats. All of those things that you had to do, all those experiences help you grow. And to me, they're a challenge, right? And so, I hear you. A lot of guys, I want to volunteer. A lot of guys, I want to be an analyst, and all those positions are great, and we have them too. But I think there's value in going and coaching. I think there's value in climbing the ladder. I've talked about before. If my kids want to get into coaching, I can help them, okay, but I'm not going to, at least at the beginning, because I'm going to tell them, hey, go find a school at the Division III level. Let's go coach there for a while, and kind of cut your teeth and learn who you are and fail and grow, and then eventually you'll get your opportunity to kind of come up to the higher levels. Because I think sometimes it's a mistake of a dad when they just, hey, we're going to just give you the GA job. Let's earn the GA job.
Yeah. And it's getting harder and harder to get jobs, for heaven's sakes. Okay. Now let's talk about, you mentioned something else. Oh, then you climbed the ladder and you went to Minnesota for 7 years. Tough leaving?
It was very hard. We had a great experience there. The Twin Cities was a really nice place to live. And Coach Fleck did a really good job there, and he was good to work for. And we had good people on the staff, but so it was really, really hard to leave. And I think the fact that I did leave, I think speaks volumes to Michigan State. And it speaks volumes to Coach Smith, because I've had some opportunities to leave before, and it wasn't the right situation, and this one was.
And you know when the right situation's there, right?
Absolutely.
You absolutely know when a good situation. Okay, I want you to define one more thing for me, and it's so important because I did evaluations for 30 years, and everybody says, "Man, that guy runs a 4.4. I won't recruit him unless he runs a 4.4." So then I say, "Well, the cornerback's running 4.4 too. You better tell him, watch him if he can separate, if he can break in and out of, and then also if he knows he has the ability to know if they switch a coverage, what does he have to do?" So tell me how important ability to learn is for any position, any position.
Yeah, I think it's paramount. I think it's one of the most important things. And as I've done this coaching thing longer and longer, the ability to process, the ability to learn, the ability to make quick decisions, I think that separates players. To be honest with you, I use the example like you got to be above the line, right? Like I wasn't an above the line player. I was a Division III player, so my processing speed, my intelligence could be off the charts, but I wasn't a good enough athlete. If you're above the line athletically and you meet the minimum criteria, to me, the thing that'll determine your success more than anything else, your character, your work ethic, your ability to deal with adversity, and then your football intelligence and your ability to process.
Right.
Those things are absolutely critical. Players who have those things go on to reach their potential at a much higher level than a guy who has a certain speed number or a certain size.
I left out process, okay? And you got to be able to process. I guess that would be the wide receiver processing what he sees and everything. So it's tough. And you have to study. Okay, give me about 5 minutes to talk to young players. How important is film study for high school players?
I think it can give you an advantage. The reality is, if you're big and strong and fast and athletic, you could probably have a very successful career in high school and not really watch any film. But what I would tell you is you're not giving yourself the best chance to have your best career. That's the first thing. The second thing I would tell you is at the college level, if you don't excel at film study, you're going to have a really hard time having a successful career. So why not start learning that process when you're young? And I know for a fact when you go to the NFL, you have no chance to last if you're not able to study film and learn and get tips. So I think each level you go up, it's more important. But my thing would be, hey, listen, it's going to allow you to have an advantage on other people. And so if you want to have that advantage starting right now in high school, then I would buy into it. You've got the huddle and you've got the cut-ups. And I think you're not allowing yourself to be your best if you're not taking advantage of it.
When you started, did you look at 16 millimeter? I don't know. That wasn't that long ago. Yes.
No, I was not a 16 millimeter guy. I was a VHS guy. But like even with that part of it, like I mean, you had to make copies. Your coach had to let you to let you borrow them. They weren't cut, and then. So it was much harder to study film then than it is now.
I was just joking with you. In Ohio right now, we had to have spring football. We had to have 7-on-7 all year long. We had to have all these things because it's going to make us a better football prospects. I don't necessarily agree with that, Coach. I mean, it helps. But now we also say, well, they got to play more than one sport. They got to play more than one sport. Well, make up your mind. I mean, you're going to have to focus on one or the other. Tell me about your thoughts on playing more than one sport.
Yeah, we prefer that someone plays more than one sport. I think, a couple of things. Number one, it works on different skill sets. It trains your body in a different way. Right. It allows you to compete because when you specialize, you're only competing a small amount of time during the year. And then the third thing is, honestly, I think it helps limit injuries. I think when you start training specifically for one sport at a young age and are continually doing the same type of training, a lot of times that leads to injuries. And so, we like to see multiple sports. We think it rounds the player out.
Just a few more questions, and it's 18 minutes, and goes fast. Okay, Coach, I believe that there are coaches that can just look deeper than what they see in a football player. They see inside, they see potential, they see all those things. And a lot of the younger coaches, they don't pay attention to that anymore, I don't think. I think they're more worried about stars. I really believe this. I don't think they really listen to kids. Important, right?
Yes. To me, it's the character traits, right? The intangibles. Those are the things that define players. The ability to deal with adversity, the ability to deal with hard things. Like those things to me will determine success of players more than just athletic ability. Again, I go back to you got to be good enough. Like you got to be a Big Ten player if you're going to play in the Big Ten. However, I think sometimes you get caught up in the biggest, the fastest. At the end of the day, to me, the character traits, the intangibles, those things are more critical than anything. I had the good fortune of coaching some really, really good players at the last place that I was at.
Yeah.
And the reason those guys were so good, and we had 11 guys drafted in the last, 4 or 5 years, is, yeah, they were talented, but they were smart and they worked hard and they had the character traits that separated them from other people. And I think that's what you're talking about. I think you get around players as a recruiter and you can find and get a feel for the guys who are really, really good people, who work really, really hard, who are really, really smart.
And does he have potential at 20 or at 21? Is he going to be there for you? Let me give you 2 examples. One, Antoine Winfield Jr. at Minnesota.
Yeah.
See, I wrote about his dad when he played at Akron. I think he was at what school in Akron, but I wrote about his dad. He was just a guy supposedly coming out of college or coming out of high school. He played pretty well for you, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to stars, he was a 2-star player. He just signed the richest free agent contract in NFL history for a defensive back. He's undersized. He's 5'9.5", but he's phenomenal. He was all pro this last year. I think the thing that he had, you just look at Antoine, number one, he ran really well. He was really fast. Okay. But he worked. He was the hardest worker every day in practice, and his football intelligence and his processing speed was off the charts.
Yeah.
And so maybe he wasn't the biggest, but those other things allowed him to play at such a high level.
He's making more money than I am right now.
Absolutely.
The other one I would give you an example, Coach, is, and I think we talked about this before we come on, Nick Samak. He's an offensive lineman. Now you haven't coached him, but when he was at Mentor, there were 3 offensive linemen, and 2 of them went to a bigger school in Ohio. And I told Nick, I said, you probably don't understand, but you're the best potential player. You're going to be really good, because he has so much. You could just see it coming out of him. Plus, he was tough. I mean, he bites you, and I know he's going on. I think he got drafted in the 7th round or something out of Michigan State. But those are kind of guys that you just have to be able to see deeper into. And it's easy for me to say, because I can get them right once in a while.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's what Coach D'Antonio and his staff made a living on in recruiting, and that's how he built State into a Big Ten champion.
Right.
And I think you can do both. And what I mean by that is you can recruit really high profile kids who have a lot going because they are talented, and we need to, because we're a national brand. But at the same time, I think you can find tough, hard-nosed, blue-collar, smart, high-character players, and those are the kids that you can build a program on.
Right.
And so for us, I think one of the things that we're really striving to do is to really get back to recruiting the Midwest. And Coach Smith talks about recruiting inside out and starting in Michigan and working out to Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and continuing to work out, but starting here in the Midwest.
Right. I think it's, of course, who am I, but I think it's really a good idea. And then pick your pick maybe the away from like Florida or someplace, the no-brainer. The no-brainer. If he comes in, he's a team guy, you're all set. Coach
Yeah,
Rossi, I really appreciate you taking the time, and it goes fast. And I wanted to know more about you and your thoughts. I mean, I know that I'm an old 4-4 guy defensively, and now everybody's running a 4-4, like something similar to that. But I appreciate your time. I see you on your children on Facebook. I don't know if they're children, but I see your kids on Facebook, and it's just so neat. So appreciate it. Thank you very much.
no, I appreciate you having me on anytime. And just so you know, like over the years of recruiting and knowing the job that you do, you're top notch, your evaluations, it's with you, like you mentioned, trust, right? Some people you get really quickly, hey, I can't trust this guy, but you're one of the few that, hey, that you do the homework, you go beyond, what's on the surface, and you get really into what type of person the player is and what their work ethic is and character. And when you say a guy's a guy, you can trust that a guy's a guy.
Coach, I really appreciate those comments. And, it's not about me. It's about the kids. And if I ever wanted to make money, I charge kids. No, I would never do that. I will
Right.
never do that. Thanks again, Coach. I appreciate it.
Thank you.